one of the renowned journal, British Journal of Middle East Studies. So, Dr. Nadine, over to you. I welcome you in this workshop, and we are privileged to have you, to have your expertise for the session on qualitative research.
Thank you, Doctor. Good evening, everyone. If you are in India, we would say good evening, and if you are located somewhere around Jordan, then we would say good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me as a speaker. Thank you for Dr. Verma as well for this opportunity. I believe that this session would be more of an interactive session that would bring ethnography to the table, which is usually a methodology that is adopted by sociology and anthropology. As Dr. Verma mentioned, my name is Nadine Khair, and this is the Arabic way, or Nadine Khair, the American English way, whatever you want to call it. I am an assistant professor in marketing at the American University of Madaba. And basically, I wanted to discuss a couple of things to begin with. So basically, we will start. I hope that everybody is seeing my slides. I would highly appreciate if towards some certain slides, I would ask for opinions. So if it's okay with Dr. Verma as well, we can have people comment on certain slides.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor. Basically, for the agenda today, we will be talking about a brief introduction about myself, personal background. We will be talking about an interpretive approach, which is more of interpretation, which is more of qualitative research. Then we will move further to qualitative research, ethnography, and methodology. Ethnography here is used as a methodology, and I will be discussing bits and pieces related to that. Data generation, usually we call it data collection in quantitative research. In qualitative research, we refer to data generation, which is basically the generation of new data. I decided to take a look or inform you guys about interactive group interviews, and I will talk about them briefly. Responsive interviews as well, the difference between them both, and observations and how observations could be valid. The final thing that we will be discussing today is the analysis process. The analysis process will break down into coding, into how to create themes, how do you generate themes, and how do you create basically codes. I believe one of the doctors is incapable of seeing the slides. Can I stop the presentation and repeat it again, or should I try presenting again? Dr. Verma?
Yeah, I think you have some problem in presenting the slide.
Second, doctor, let me see something real quick. I just want to make sure if you can't see the slides, 1 minute. It should be visible now.
No, it's
not yet. Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay. Apologies for the technical issue. I'm happy to repeat a quick recap. I was mentioning that I will be talking about an introduction, a personal background, information about myself, interpretive approach, which is the interpretation rather than the positivist approach, qualitative research, ethnography as a methodology, data generation and the difference between data collection and data generation. Examples on data generation in qualitative research are interactive interviews, responsive interviews, and observations. The analysis process, and I will be discussing under the analysis process, the coding process, the creation of themes, and how do we analyze and collect at the same time. So basically I will move further. Just a bit of to throw out the formal aspect of the presentation and introduce a more personal aspect. I decided to create a frame that contains different pictures, different stages. So Dr. Verma already has explained and introduced me very well. Thank you so much. Slides are on half screen. Do you want me to present them full screen? I'm happy to do that as well.
Yeah, full screen, please, full screen, because few people might be watching it on mobile, so it will be difficult for them to get. Yeah, now it is okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, I wanted to present in a different way. I was presented by Dr. Verma in a very interesting way. Thank you very much. As you already know, I am an assistant professor in marketing at the American University of Madaba. I wanted to introduce you to the pictures in different stages of my life. Basically, the first one right there is the consequence of the fact that I was born in 1991. And the one to the right is my high school graduation from the US. My bachelor's degree and master's degree in the US as well, and my PhD in the UK, along with my current job at the moment. I am a doctor in basically international marketing and consumer behavior fashion marketing. I've obtained an MBA specialized in marketing management and an MSc in risk management and business continuity management. I'm involved in different committees. I'm the chair of the alumni committee for the university, chair of the examination committee, and a member of the general branding and marketing committee across the BOT board of trustees and the university as well. My previous experience was discussed by Dr. Verma. I've worked with several other companies in different positions. I was the sales and marketing manager for Jordanian Coast Cargo, which is a shipping company in Jordan that works internationally. I have teaching experience in the UK as well, and I am currently an assistant professor in the American University of Madaba. I won't be long, so I will be talking about the social science approach and how we reach the interpretive approach. If you take a look at the following table is adopted from Collis and Hussey, and basically it talks about the difference in the projection of reality and how reality really differs from a quantitative perspective to a qualitative perspective. If you take a look at the far left-hand side, this is an extreme positivist approach, which is extreme quantitative approach that only relies on labs and experiments and surveys, and a lot of people rely on that because they see the validity to be more, they see that this is the normal behavior that the research needs. If you take a look towards the right, the far right is a very interpretive approach. That doesn't mean that the following here is not an interpretive approach. It is. The far right-hand side, which is reality as a projection of human imagination, is basically what Dr. Verma began to explain in the very beginning of this session, is the auto-ethnography type of research, which is explaining the human mind at an individual level. So it doesn't have to be generalized, it doesn't have to be of the social surroundings, it's basically of an individual mind, individual perspective. My current area of research, I recently researched one article that was thankfully accepted by the Journal of British Studies of Middle Eastern Studies, British Journal of Middle Eastern Studies. And I'm usually at this point here where this is a social construction or a social constructivism approach. This approach relies on the fact that the social world is created by individuals, by people, by routines, by language, by culture, and it is part of the fact that we don't see things the same way. We are not all under the same umbrella. I could see a specific object and say something about it, and you could see the following object and say something totally different. So before I move on, basically, if you take a look at this table, the one in between is a mixed method approach. It's kind of a social world is more symbolic relationships related. So meanings are obtained from qualitative research, but also obtained or let's say validated by quantitative research. If we move further, and this is where I would appreciate cooperation, appreciate interaction. When I've mentioned social constructivism, I've mentioned that people see things differently. And if you take a look at the definition of social constructivism or constructivism, contends that we take a critical perspective when trying to understand the world. So we need to be critical in the sense of how. We want to know why knowledge is obtained socially and how is it socially created through social interactions. Ideas, opinions, people, individuals, backgrounds, how do they influence the way we think, the way we have or establish meanings? If you wanted to take a look at, let's say, we will use two pictures from here. If you wanted to take a look at the following, can someone tell me, please, what do you see here? The following picture.
Yes, participants, please. It is a workshop, so you might be having a lot of questions.
Can I have the question again, ma'am?
Sure, of course. Can I ask you to take a look at the following picture here? What do you see?
The first one says a bird with a peak. Second one, I could see that is a bear lying on the ice land. Third one, it seems like an elephant. Fourth, yes, there are two ways. One can see the flask, one can see the two faces, side faces. Means in a different way, if we see, we could identify different things like the middle one in the last row. There are two different ways if I could see. Similar, same way the last pic, if there is a side pose of a face as well as the front face could be seen. Means
I'm sorry, I lost. I can't hear you properly. Yes, can you repeat what you've mentioned about the last picture?
Yeah, there is a signal issue at my end.
No worries, no worries.
What I mean to say is the different ways if I could see, I could identify two different things in each picture. Like the last row, the first pic says about a flask as well as two side faces. So I could see two different things.
Yes.
A dual perspective, yes, as Divan said. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your participation. Does anyone else want to comment about any of the following pictures? Okay, so basically my point of view is some of you might not have been exposed to the following pictures. Some of you are very familiar with the following picture here, which is both a younger girl and an older lady as well. The following shows two faces at certain times, and others might see the flask at other times. This picture might show you a side profile of someone, but also a straight face of someone. The participant who participated earlier on, I'm sorry, I can't see the names when I'm presenting full screen, mentioned that there is a little bear lying down here. However, a lot of people might see a seal in a bigger picture. So the perspective of the following social constructivism approach is basically people see things differently. So can we generalize the following pictures that many people see them that way? We need to take perspective from each and every single person. So I've included for you as well a theory that's very important in sociology, but also was very important in marketing to explain the reasons or the why behavior. So symbolic interactionism talks about human beings, talks about how they act. So we may attach certain meanings to certain aspects or objects. These meanings are basically obtained from our social interactions. A lot of times, and I'm pretty sure it's similar in the Middle East and it's similar in India as well, a lot of cultural important aspects affect the way we consume, affect the way we think, affect the way of how we decide to act across a specific object. Therefore, if we move further on, qualitative research. What is really qualitative research? It helps you understand a phenomenon when it's in the environment, within its environment. So it does not take you out of the phenomenon, it makes you understand why this is happening in the current environment. Meaning and interpretations are required to attach significance to counts and classifications, and these are fundamental in qualitative matters. What I'm trying to explain here is that a lot of questions arise when we ask why behind a research question, which is the third point. Usually we want to know meanings, we want to interpret these meanings, and usually we want to classify them by explaining what is important, what is considered to be quality, and how are we supposed to use the following information. The why aspect is basically what is usually addressed by researchers when they are creating their research question. So if you take a look at the following point, the third point, this third point talks precisely about the fact that the researcher has a research question, and this research question is guided. So this research question is established due to a gap situated in the research or in previous articles or previous research. The following research question is what directs a person or a researcher into creating that piece of qualitative research. Most of the time, from what I've experienced in the US, in the UK, and across different articles, across different editors, across different journals, is that often qualitative research is underestimated in terms of reliability and validity. And this is where I will be touching base in depth about the following point, which is very important when discussing qualitative research, just because of the fact that instead of saying this is how much agree, we are saying the following agree because. So we are using the why as an aspect. And of course, we will be talking about ethnography in depth. So what is ethnography? I was fortunate enough to attend a session, a workshop, and I was chosen one out of 5 researchers in the UK to attend an ethnography workshop in the University of Loughborough. And surprisingly, I was the only person who was from a business background, because ethnography is a design that's coming from basically an anthropology or a sociology approach or background. Because people want to know about the culture, people want to know more about the language, about the actions. And I've heard stories in that workshop that really were very intense, to the point that I thought my research was not worth what I was thinking it would be. There are researchers who live with people in jail at one point for a specific period of time to understand the reason why they committed the following murder. So we will be talking about some examples that are very, very intense. Now, why is it important? There's a very important point in the definition of ethnography. There are actually 2 points. The first point is the fact that you are conducting the research in the natural setting. You are not taking people out of the natural setting and creating a research. You are not asking them to fill out a survey. You are not telling them to take a look at the following. No. You are actually, as a researcher, moving towards their natural setting and conducting the research there. The second important point of that definition is the fact that we are talking about a period of time. There's a say in Jordan that says من عاشر القوم أصبح منهم أو من عاشر القوم ل60 يوم أصبح منهم. You're probably wondering, what am I saying? I just said, if you live with a specific group of people for a specific amount of time, you are part of them. You develop actions, you develop acts, you become one of them. You live their experiences, you share their thoughts, you understand what they are thinking about. And this is exactly what Fetterman, the second point, discusses. Ethnography gives the researcher the ability to see the world from the eyes of the participants rather than what is well known and what is known to be in the area of research. And I will be explaining more about that following point in particular. One of the best points that I like to talk about when I talk about ethnography is that it breaches the gap between the researcher and the individual. It kind of creates a relationship, and at that point, some of you might wonder, is this academic research? Does this cross lines? When I say a relationship, you are being close to the experience, not the person. So you are understanding the phenomenon from the person or the participant himself or herself. And this is where you are getting more honest opinions, more honest answers, more detailed answers. And a lot of people actually write in their diaries of what goes on and how is it conducted. So one of the very important quotes that was mentioned by Matthew Desmond is the fact that ethnography is what you do when you try to understand people by allowing their lives to mold your own as fully and genuinely as possible. Now, this definition on its own might create a bias somewhere by the fact that you are not maintaining distance. It's very important when you are an ethnographer or when you are a researcher that wants to be embedded in some type of a research that you maintain your distance. At the same time, you are embedded within the culture or embedded within a group of people. When we say keep the distance, there's a difference between keeping a distance and keeping your ideas or thoughts away, because in ethnography, this is called reflexivity. Now, we will talk about this more in the next slides. However, maintaining distance means kind of containing yourself, containing your psychological state as well. Depends on the type of research that's being researched. This sometimes is never an issue, but it is an issue when you are riding with a police car to know how they actually arrest people, or for living in jail for 3 years to figure out exactly why crimes are created, why people actually go ahead and kill someone. So if we're talking about ethnography in depth, it's a very basic research, but it's very deep. So it's very detailed. It's very detailed from the perspective of the participants as well. So when you are saying the ethnographic pitch, here we are talking about the method, the data generation. How deep is the method? If I live with a specific amount of people for a week, I will not obtain the depth that I want to obtain if I live there for 16 months. If I talk to people and live with them, psychologically, people might forget the fact that you are an outsider conducting research, and we will be talking about the emic and the etic approach. Ethnography is usually related to fluid because it could get everywhere, it could reach different areas, no matter how unexpected these areas are, or no matter how unwanted the following area is. The ethnographer is part of the social world being studied. This is very important. If the ethnographer is not part of the social atmosphere, then it is not ethnography. A lot of people might wonder, and this was a question that I was asked during my PhD viva, and I'm happy to discuss it more down the line, was the fact that why did you conduct your research in Jordan? And I answered one question, that question with another question. Why not? Because I lived my life in different countries, and the least basically was Jordan. So I wanted to know more about my own culture, which was to some extent weird for the examiner that I don't know enough. However, as long as it is justified, it is valid. And I will explain down the line how this was done. If you take a look at ethnography, fieldwork is very important. So people being studied, there's some sort of physical proximity where you are close but distant at the same time. It's a plus if you have knowledge of their language, because I'm pretty sure you agree with me that some words cannot be translated easily. And if they are translated, then they lose meaning. So meaning is the primary aspect behind ethnography, and therefore the knowledge of the language is very important. A high degree of physical and emotional involvement, a lot of people actually get some sort of physical or emotional involvement throughout the research, and a lot of people do that after the research. This is very important, and this was discussed by Ellen in 1984 by saying that you need to step in and out of cultures. You can't step in and stay there, and you can't not step out. Just away from the formalities as well, this is a not so good picture of myself during the graduation. However, the following was my PhD thesis title. My title was Exploring the Meanings Jordanian Consumers Allocate to Foreign Brands, an ethnography on understanding the effect of brand country of origin image on consumption. This was based on a personal experience. I felt it. I heard about it. When we buy a piece of clothing that was made in Jordan, a lot of people don't think highly of it, and a lot of Jordanian consumers don't think highly of it. However, brands like Puma, Victoria's Secret, different brands in Macy's, for example, in the US, actually manufacture in our country. So why? Why is it that I don't think highly of the made in Jordan brands? This was something that I've done when I was 22, and it changed totally when I became at this age. A lot of people think that way, and this is exactly why, for the first time in country of origin research and in international marketing, this has been a topic that has been researched for the past 35 years in quantitative methods. And when it was in quantitative methods, I always wondered reading articles saying, how would you understand why? So we do this, okay? We prefer foreign brands, but why? Why is it important? So basically, to help you out on how to conduct research and how do you generate data. Literature is literature. You have to start broad and also write the paper in a broad sense and then to a specific sense, highlighting the gap and your contribution, which is a typical way of writing research. However, data generation. How is data generation created in qualitative research? How is proper analysis done? Is it really time consuming? Yes, it is, I won't lie. However, it is time consuming, but you could get a good publication out of it and numerous publications out of the same article which could be replicated. And this is how the generalization aspect works in qualitative research. Now, the easiest way, I was telling Dr. Verma earlier on, the easiest way to tell you how to conduct is to show you a real-life example. So I chose to show you the way I've conducted my PhD, which is a more detailed approach for you to use one approach out of the following to actually incorporate it in your research. So if you take a look in the following diagram tells you social constructivism. So here I am telling you that I use the social constructivism perspective. I incorporated symbolic interactionism theory, and I decided to follow an ethnographic methodology. One of the major fears that I had when I wanted to go ahead and defend my thesis was the words validity and reliability. And I realized that the easiest way to do this with my excellent supervisors, Professor Jonathan Deacon and Dr. Elizabeth Lloyd Parks, who made sure they actually explain it well, to the sense that I understand why my research is valid. So I've created 3 stages of research in order for saturation to take place. I wanted the meanings obtained in stage 1 to be replicated or expressed or explained or differentiated in stage 2, and the same thing goes for stage 3. So when I first started, I said interactive group interviews. These are communication methods where a group of people are sitting together discussing their last consumption behavior. This is where the researcher could actually talk to the small group. If they know that you are a researcher and you mention that you are a researcher, sometimes their answers might change. Now, it's very important that you mention, out of ethics, that you are a researcher. However, because it does not seem so punctual, it seems more of a communication method, you realize that people open up and share stories. So if I start by explaining my story, you might either comment or say, yes, this happened to me, but in a different way. This never happened to me. So you are exposed to particular points. Stage 2 was observations, and this included participant observation and non-participant observation. What does that mean? Non-participant observations were all the malls that were discussed in stage 1. So I was actually observing 6 different malls in Amman from areas that I've never heard of, including a second-hand market. I went with a group of people to see how that actually takes place. The participant observation bit is basically the bit that I went with the participants shopping. So I went in different contexts. I went in Jordan, I went in the UK, and I went with people who actually went to both. And I compared their behavior to see if it's something related to them as an individual or the social group that they belong to. Then I went to responsive interviews. When I needed further clarification, I went into one-on-one in responsive interviews. What they are really, they're basically extended conversations where you are asking the question that was generated from the following data, and you are probing them into making them talk more. So this took place over almost 18 months to collect data. However, what I wanted to tell you, which is mentioned here, is that the analysis and the interpretation and the data generation took place at the same time. I will explain exactly what that means in the following slides. So if you take a look at the following, these are actually a full description of how I created the following stages. The first, interactive group interviews, I actually did not guide them whatsoever. I gave them a minimum guidance approach. So they were sharing stories, and once they share the stories, I'm actually there writing or jotting down notes, recording if I have consent, and making sure that I listen carefully to what they say. I had to allow them to talk about their background, where they come from, what they do, and the participants were basically a variety of participants, so variety of age, variety of occupation, etc. Gaining ethic and emic experience, this is very important. This is what I've mentioned earlier. Emic is basically when you obtain experience from internal perspectives, and ethic, so my Jordanian side, my Jordanian background was in there, but at the same time I had the outside background information and experience. If I had used probes, which was very minimal, I used the following probes, which were common themes in my literature, and I will explain why this was done in a bit. Stage 2, as I've mentioned, shopping trips, field notes, clarification sometimes from stage 1. I did not get that. What did you mean by that while walking in the mall? I went to different locations to observe. I literally sat down and saw most of the people, what do they see in the mall? What do they see? What bags are they carrying? Why is it important that they carry bags with foreign brands, not local brands? Then I moved to stage 3. Themes generated from stage 1 and 2 were the probes. So whatever they answered me, whatever they told me, were actually the probes of the discussion. Questions were designed according to the ongoing analysis, and basically to make sure that I jot down what the participants actually mean. They were given the chance to review the interpretation of what they answered and how they behaved in stage 2. If you take a look at the amount of work that was done in the following stages, you would understand what is meant by deep. So if it was very detailed, it's unlikely to be questioned in terms of validity. So initially, briefly, how do you start analyzing the data? So my major advice, and it's very important, is the fact of instant transcription. So after the interview, if you did not jot word by word, if you did not record, even if you record, make sure an instant transcription takes place, because you remember the way the person acted. When you type or you listen to the recording immediately and you type the comments, you are remembering how the facial expressions were. You are remembering the location. You are remembering internal details that are very important. Using concepts and themes in the literature basically is the easiest form of creating codes. So if I wanted to say country of origin image, then basically if someone mentions the reputation of a specific brand because it was made in Italy, this falls under the definition of country of origin image. So usually, and I will explain in the slides as well, how the code book is generated. Using the code book to transcribe data is very important. You have to stick to the code book, otherwise it would be very messy. A lot of people might tell me, doctor, you did not talk about in vivo, you did not talk about softwares. I am a person who does not use softwares, which is more work, 100%, but it gives you that amount of being so close to data. I understand that we have our responsibilities and sometimes we don't have time to research, and even if we want to research, we want something that is quality but also quick. Sometimes you'd be surprised. The more details you put in a piece of work, the easier that you can replicate the methodology. And this is something I will be explaining in a bit as well. Coding again electronically and on a Word document. I will also show you a sample which probably might scare you. However, it would be a live example. And how do you organize the coding process? I personally follow Rubin and Rubin, which is one of the best authors in terms of qualitative research. They give us a description of the steps that we need to actually go ahead and conduct. So they explain to you that you prepare transcripts is the first stage. So you create the transcripts as soon as possible. A lot of people create initial summaries. So let's say I've interviewed one of you, and after interviewing you, yes, I have the recording. However, I want to create a summary of what I remember from your interview. Coding, this code includes defining, finding, and marking. So I need to define the code in the code book so that anything that falls under the following code has to be found and marked as that code. Sort and summarize. This is where you are being very critical. So you are combining the codes together and you are taking a look. Okay, does this make sense? Is this what the participant means? Then you start ranking them by which one is closer to the code, and you compare, because sometimes you have transcripts that would fall under two different codes, and this is where it gets very tricky. When you sort and compare, you need to be able to distinguish between the codes. Other than that, you shouldn't have the following two codes, you should combine them into one. You weigh, you integrate, and this is the combining aspect. You check and modify. You combine it in a way to generate your own theory. And this was the contribution of my PhD. I created two different terms that were considered to be a theory that might be the reason behind a lot of people who actually decide to prefer foreign brands over local brands in Jordan. Generalizing in qualitative research does not exist except if you replicate the same exact methodology in a different topic. And this is where you get the generalizing aspect, because you are generalizing the way you conducted the research, the way you wanted to know why. This is what is being generalized, basically. So I decided to give you an example of the pre-existing themes, for example, in the code book, which were generated from the literature. So these are the naming of the codes. So materialism, for example, country of origin image includes what? The significance, the influence on consumption, the negative, positive perception of the country, its products. Whatever is mentioned under the following falls under the following code. So this, as you can see, excludes, for example, economy or economic situation. And this is how you organize the data in that sense. Now, this is the scary part, which might scare you. Obviously, you are incapable of seeing the quotes inside. However, each color is actually a code. So the following blue codes are the very initial stages of basically Reuben and Reuben, where I am sorting them and I'm kind of organizing them. Okay? So now you might think that this is very confusing. It's not as bad as it seems. However, it has to be organized in order for you to do it manually. The analysis, which I was inspired by my primary supervisor, Professor Jonathan Deacon, in terms of using the hermeneutic spiral. So hermeneutic analysis is very popular in qualitative research. It's also referred to as thematic analysis as well. So why is it different than thematic? Basically, if you take a look at this before we move on, if you take a look at this spiral, you could see that I've obtained the information into the methodology, or the text into the methodology, or the probes, or the codes from literature. So here I've obtained them from literature. Here I carried the following information into stage 1. The information obtained with stage 1 and that literature was actually carried into stage 2, and from there to stage 3. The reason why it's very important is because it allows you to interpret data in order to continue throughout the research. So you would be able to understand what the person is actually saying. Analyzing the data as you go helps you gain new insights. So a lot of times you reach saturation in a very, very short stage, and sometimes you don't. You're not hearing the same exact thing. You need time. And this is where you are developing new insights throughout the stages. The research adopted, as I've mentioned, thematic analysis and a hermeneutic spiral, and I've adopted the one that was used in slide 14, which is Reuben and Reuben, the 7 stages. I also wanted to explain the fact that the interpretation of data used in hermeneutic analysis and in thematic analysis is basically the reason why you generate theory. Helps you generate theory. It helps you interpret the current theory and understand why, but also generate new insights. one of the major points in ethnography that I took time to understand is how to be reflexive without being biased. How can I comment about the interpretation without putting my own perspective involved? It's basically the fact that you are being reflective by explaining what happened. So when you were interviewing the following person, when you were observing the following person, what happened? What was the atmosphere? What was the experience? Also, your experience, your value, your belief, your fear at certain times is central when you are creating an ethnographic narrative. A lot of people might say this might actually result in a bias research. However, the more detailed, the more depth, the more it seems to be something that you would believe. A lot of people refuse to believe based on depth or quality. They are more about numbers. So does this tell me this medicine will cure, let's say this vaccine will cure the following pandemic that we are passing through? This is something related to the pharmaceutical industry, absolutely yes. This is something related to the health industry, absolutely yes. However, when you are trying to capture the reasons why people behave in a specific way, it's very important to understand the reason behind the following behavior. When actually criticism was associated to ethnography, reflexivity was the reason why that critique or certain critiques actually decided to change their perspective, because the amount of details included about each participant, and the amount of details included about the profile of participants, the background of participants, the experiences of different participants vary. So it gives you that credible aspect. I just wanted to end the presentation by saying to make an end is to make a beginning, and I'm really happy to hear questions from you, and I hope this was interesting. I have the following references for the following slide in the last 3 slides. Thank you.
So now I request all the participants, if you have any question, you may unmute yourself and you may ask to Nadine.
Hi, I'm Nisha here.
Hi, Nirja. Hi.
Ma'am, I need to know, like, any specific area where it can be applied. Like, if, I want to research about this, like, let's say the current teaching pedagogy, that is online classes going on these days. So, can I apply this over there? Like, I become a part of it, then I go and interview the teachers and students. Like, can it be proceeded in this type of research also?
Absolutely. To be honest, Nirja, this was something I was thinking about. However, because everything we hear about today is COVID-19, I'm trying to shift away from online teaching in terms of research. This is very applicable in online research. You took experience out of it. You had your own experience, and you could be the person commenting on others' experiences. So if you would like to take this from the perspective of doctors, so let's go back to the following. Let's say if there was, sure. And now, sorry, Nirja, I saw a question. If you want to take a look at the following, for example, interactive group interviews, if you can create a session on a recorded session with doctors and explaining certain questions that you have in mind that you have from experience, but also have research or literature about in terms of teaching, the quality of teaching, is it the same? What is your, first of all, you need to highlight your research question. Most importantly, you need to highlight the research question. And this is the reason why you start with it to know how to move forward. So let's say you organize a session with doctors, and at the same time you organize a session with students, and you are the commenter on both because you are experiencing currently the situation.
Okay. Yes. Nice one. Thank you.
Sure. I think there was a question, Dr. Verma, about generalization in terms of qualitative research.
Yeah.
Yes, and I wanted to touch base on that. When we talk about generalization, usually we associate generalization to quantitative research, because I can say if it applies to that much people, then in the Middle East, in Jordan, then it should apply to that much people in the Middle East. I can't say that in qualitative research. What I can say is let me replicate the same exact methodology that was done in Jordan, in India, or in Egypt, and see what results am I going to get. Because each individual is different. So the generalization aspect is the fact that we are generalizing the methodology, if that makes sense. The replication of methodology to generate new outcomes that are associated to a particular setting.
Ritu, can you see any other question in chat box?
You're welcome, thank you. Okay, in terms of coding, how generalization application put on qualitative data. Okay, I think the person is asking about this slide in particular. Generalization, this is just telling you, after you are done with the generation of theory, you can't generalize the theory. You need to replicate the methodology in that setting in order to generalize the theory. Now, the perspective here is the fact that it has nothing to do with the coding aspect. Generalization is not about the coding aspect, it's about after that.
Dr. Nadine, I have one question that all the scholars, research scholars, generally they feel that if they are going to conduct some empirical study or quantitative study, then it would be highly valuable. They don't go for qualitative research. So, what do you suggest to all of them in terms of writing papers using this qualitative approach? How they should go ahead in developing the paper?
Absolutely. I think I, at certain times, felt that way as well. At certain times, I said, why did I conduct qualitative research in my PhD? Till today, I think I made the right decision in terms of what I've done to know why. In publications, usually there's a barrier. If you were a qualitative researcher and you want to move to quantitative, it's a barrier. And if you were a quantitative researcher moving to qualitative, it's also a barrier. So if you take a look at what I'm trying to say at the moment, what you need to do is basically understand where is the problem. So ask yourself a question. For example, Ms. Nerja mentioned that the online experience is very difficult or easy. I don't know. I still can't know. However, she wants to research that to see if it's quality, to know what she wants to know about online teaching. The easiest way to conduct a research article is to actually figure out your research question. Once you figure out the research question, what is the gap? What is it that we want to know? What happened to the economy? What happened to local goods? What happened to imported goods? What happened with the online teaching? What happened to the teaching experience? Why is this happening? You figure out the areas that you want to touch base, and this is where you generate themes. I believe the generation of themes helps a lot in writing your literature review. So, for example, let's say my primary research question for my PhD was, why do consumers prefer foreign clothing brands?
Yeah.
So underneath that question, I actually created themes. So what do I need to know? Consumer behavior. Under consumer behavior, I still don't know. Okay, I have to read. I wanted to know country of origin image, which is foreign brands. Why are local brands not so wanted? And where do I want to do or conduct the research? I said Jordan. So I looked at the developing versus developed country approach, which is usually we prefer whatever is considered to be from a developed country. So the generation of themes gives you an insight into what are you looking in the methodology? What answers are you looking for? And this is where you generate the question. It's easier now today, especially that we are relying on the internet for everything we do. It's easy to create questions and interviews online with people today. So these interviews could be recorded as well. And the analysis process is way more simple than what you saw today, just because the data is less. It will not be a PhD thesis. This will be an article that you would code, create themes, mention participants what do they think. Sometimes you would have to generate a new theme, whereas what I showed earlier in the following slide, which is an example of the code book. The code book included this, spending what they don't have. This is not a term or a theme well known in the literature. I actually created it. I created that theme to see that people actually react in a way that they spend what they don't have at certain times. My perspective on qualitative research, when you create the analysis and say what happened and why people think that way or why this is taking place, the conclusion is the difficult bit, to be honest. Because you need to sum up everything from A to Z in one paragraph or two paragraphs that tell you and tell people what this research is about. Make sure in that paragraph that you answered the main research question that was mentioned in the introduction. And basically, this is my advice in terms of writing papers.
Okay, thank you.
But one thing, ma'am. What about the coding process? Like anything we need to refer, like how the coding process has to be developed. I mean, how to create this coding process.
I would suggest that you follow Ruben and Ruben. This book is highly recommended because he gives you exactly a description of each step. So he tells you, first of all, type the interviews, type what the participants told you, and then when you want to code it, from your extensive reading in the literature or in the area, you need to highlight the themes that click. So this theme was mentioned by authors' self-image, for example. So you would say that the following initial codes, create initial codes. It's okay if you actually change the codes with time. So you create an initial code, and after reading more, you realize, no, this is not the right name for it. Then you actually sort them together, summarize them, make sure you are ranking them properly. So for example, it could be the fact that you have developing country underneath something else rather than economic development, okay? So you need to make sure they are under each other. And then once participants are saying a particular, let's say, sentence about a specific theme, make sure you rank them, you put them in order, so that when you want to be exposed to the following data, it's not too messy. You create a table. I could actually show you, if you would like, just a quick sample, if I can, of how I actually conduct. Sorry, just 1 second. So the following is not accepted yet. Please don't mind I did not submit it yet, but this is, for example, a research that I am currently conducting. If you take a look at the analysis, take a look, Ms. Nerja. I have participant C, E, F, J, K, L, H, Q, telling me something about academics acceptance, of norms and traditions. So these are actually quotes from the interviews. So I put them into order in order to explain what they are trying to say. However, I keep on linking them back to existing literature, in order to make sure that I am not too biased. I'm actually saying what they actually said. If it does not exist in literature, I would highlight that previous literature or previous research did not address the following.
Okay. Fine, ma'am. Fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other participant? Any other question? If you have question, please ask. Simran?
Sure. They were asking to share if I can share my email.
Yeah. Yeah, they can put in chat box, so we'll be forwarding you. No question, Ritu? I think no question.
Sir, there are no questions visible on the chat box.
Okay. So I think we should sum up over here. So thanks, Dr. Nadin, for your informative presentation, and I hope so that whatever presentation you have given, it is going to help the researchers a lot in conducting qualitative research, in developing codes, and in summarizing the results and all. So thank you so much for sparing your precious time for this international workshop. And in future as well, we would like to have you as our eminent speaker for various programs. I would also like to thank participants from India as well as from outside India for their cooperation, for their participation in the workshop. And I would also request you that very soon I will be forwarding one link for a new workshop, and that is on NVivo, how to go for conducting qualitative research, analysis of qualitative data using NVivo. So maybe by today or tomorrow I'll be putting one mail, right? So it will be a complete package how you can go for conducting qualitative research, because a lot of people are frightened to generate data, the empirical data, or just go for selection of the sample size, this and that. So it would be very nice. And I would also like to mention that right now most of the journal, they are eyeing towards qualitative research, because they have understood the importance of qualitative research. So you may go and you may conduct qualitative research. And thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Ritu, for technically coordinating the program and running it efficiently and making it on YouTube live. So, Dr. Nat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the audience and all the positive comments. Much appreciated. I hope you benefited from the information, and I am looking forward to more collaborations with you, Dr. Verma. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, please. We shall be talking tomorrow. Okay. So, yeah, now I would request everyone to please leave the meeting. Again, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.